I'm Isabella Brookside, 33, and I spent over a decade serving my country in classified operations most people will never hear about. For years, I sent money home, missed holidays, and quietly supported a family that never once asked what I was really doing. But when my sister mocked me at a dinner party, still unemployed, and everyone laughed, I made a choice that changed everything. Ever been written off by the very people you kept afloat? If you have, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into how it all unraveled, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw the line with people who took you for granted, hit like and subscribe for more real stories about standing your ground and taking your power back. What happened next caught them all off guard. I was the quiet one in a loud family, methodical, dependable, invisible in all the ways that made things easier for everyone else. My sister Lexi was the center of gravity. Loud, magnetic, dramatic. My parents hovered around her like planets. I didn't mind at first. Someone needed to remember which cabinet the passports were in, who was allergic to penicillin, when the property taxes were due. That was me. I was the details girl. It started small. I'd refill Mom's pill organizer when she forgot. I made Dad's PowerPoint slides the night before his work presentations because you're good with computers. I typed Lexi's college essays, proofread them while she painted her nails. I knew when her interviews were before she did. They called me the organized one. Or, when they were feeling sarcastic, our little Pentagon. Dad thought that was funny. I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA, no scandals, no boyfriends, no mess. Just clean transcripts, clean routines. I didn't ask for much, and in a house full of noise, that made me easy to overlook. Senior year, I got recruited. Quietly. There's a pipeline most people don't know about: language aptitude, logic testing, clearance vetting, all before you even hit basic. It started with a counselor pulling me aside after a test. "You're flagged for something interesting," she said. I was 17. I didn't tell my family much about it, mostly because I knew they wouldn't ask. I left for boot camp with 2 duffel bags and a tight smile from my mom at the airport. Lexi posted an Instagram story that said, "Bye sis," with a photo of my back as I walked toward security. No one offered to come with me to the gate. My first assignment wasn't glamorous. Long hours, cold rooms, not much talking. But it was important. And I was good at it. What I didn't realize was that my family had already written a different version of that chapter. In their heads, I was doing something with radios. Probably just a desk job. When I missed holidays, they joked that I was too important now, off playing G.I. Jane. The truth is, I wasn't allowed to say anything. Not about what I did. Not about where I was. Sometimes not even about when I'd be gone. So I sent cards when I could, cash when they needed it, birthday messages on secure apps that sometimes delivered days late. When Grandma died, I filed emergency leave. It was denied. I watched her funeral on a lagging live stream in a dark briefing room on a base I wasn't allowed to name. My mom texted me 3 days later, "It's okay you couldn't come. We understand." But I knew what she really meant. You made your choice. When I visited home, rare, careful visits with stories I had to rehearse, my room had been turned into a makeshift gym. Lexi's trophies lined the hallway. My photos were in a plastic bin in the garage. She'd gone into marketing. Flashy campaigns, product launches, a job with a title that sounded like a party. Senior brand strategist, she told people. Lexi the executive, my dad said once with a proud smirk. When I visited, I'd ask how work was. They'd all take turns telling stories about Lexi's pitch meetings, her office perks, her client trips. Then they'd turn to me. "So, are you still in?" my mom would ask vaguely. "In what?" "You know, the military thing." "Yeah," I'd answer. "Oh, still top secret," she'd laugh. They never asked what I was working on, never asked if I was okay. Once, at dinner, Lexi said, "We think you're probably just pushing papers somewhere. You've always been good with filing cabinets." She laughed. Everyone else laughed too. I smiled, but my hand tightened around my fork. I didn't argue. I couldn't. But what none of them knew was that by then, I'd already completed 2 overseas deployments. I'd briefed senators in rooms with no windows. I'd worn a different name, spoke in different languages, navigated lives that weren't mine. And when I came home, I did the dishes, made the coffee, and helped Dad set up his new iPhone like nothing had changed. They didn't know I once spent 6 days under blackout, eating nothing but protein bars and writing reports that shaped global operations. They didn't know about the medical evacuation I coordinated that saved 4 civilian contractors, or the flash drive I personally couriered across 3 countries, staying awake for 39 hours straight. They knew I'd miss Lexi's birthday dinner at the country club. They remembered that. But they didn't know why. They assumed the worst. Or worse, they didn't think at all. Lexi once told me I had main character syndrome for not showing up to her engagement brunch. I had been in a secure compound without sunlight for 9 straight days. I mailed her a gift, engraved champagne flutes. She never mentioned them. I started visiting less. Sending less. There was a time when I used to try. I'd save for months to fly home, just to sit in a living room full of people scrolling through their phones, acting like I was the weird cousin who'd joined a cult. Even on holidays, I felt like I was borrowing space. "Make sure you take your boots off in the kitchen," my mom would say. We just mopped. One Thanksgiving, Lexi announced to the table that I probably only joined up because I didn't have a plan. "No offense," she added, "but you weren't exactly Ivy League material." I looked at my dad. He didn't say anything. Just kept carving the turkey. That was the last Thanksgiving I came home for. Still, I sent birthday cards. Paid off a surprise car repair when my mom's engine died in winter. Helped Lexi with her taxes 1 year when she got confused about her freelance income. But gradually, they stopped calling. Unless something was broken. Then, suddenly, I was useful again. I was the steady hand behind the scenes. The one who just always figured it out. To them, I was reliable but forgettable. A backup plan in combat boots. But what they didn't realize was that behind the curtain of silence, things were shifting. The files were opening. The operations were being acknowledged. My name, once scrubbed from official reports, was starting to surface. Not in tabloids, but in certain halls, certain rooms, and eventually on certain screens. But they didn't know that yet. They still thought I was the sister with no real job. The one who missed brunches. The one who disappeared. They didn't know the whole time they were laughing I was out making history. Quietly. Professionally. Precisely. And they'd find out the hard way. Not through me, but through a news anchor. At 8 p.m. on a Wednesday. During dinner. The older we got, the more comfortable they became treating me like a punchline. It started with small things, Lexi calling my apartment the bunker during a Zoom call with extended family. Everyone laughed. I was on mute. At first, I brushed it off. Family's tease. That's what I told myself. But then came the dinner at Aunt Teresa's, one of those obligatory family gatherings where the food was cold and the conversation colder. My brother, who'd recently started a job in sales, leaned across the table with a smirk and asked, "So you still in that job thing?" He said it slowly, like it was a phase I'd eventually outgrow. I nodded. "Yes. Must be weird living in a bunker all day," he added. "Do you even have sunlight where you are?" That got a few laughs. I tried to redirect the conversation toward something neutral, Lexi's recent trip to Santorini. But it didn't matter. They'd already decided what kind of character I played in their version of the family story. Lexi's Instagram didn't help. Her feed was curated like a lifestyle magazine, sunsets over yachts, corporate retreats in Bali, smoothie bowls with captions like "work hard, play harder briefcase palm tree hashtag earned not given." Meanwhile, I didn't post anything. I couldn't. Still, I'd scroll through her posts sometimes, her grinning in a hotel robe, toasting with colleagues I'd never met, and notice the comments. "So proud of you. You've always been the one to go places. Boss lady energy." No one from our family ever commented on mine. Because there weren't any. It was easier for them to believe I'd faded into nothing than admit they didn't understand what I'd become. At one point, I started wondering if they actually preferred it that way. Because if they acknowledged what I really did, they'd have to reckon with the way they'd treated me for years. So instead, they chose ignorance. Willfully. My cousin Sarah, who used to braid my hair when we were kids, cornered me during a barbecue. She was tipsy off sangria and holding a paper plate full of ribs. "We thought you were, like, off the grid," she said, laughing. "Someone said you work underground or something. Like, are you in one of those hidden labs?" I gave a polite smile. "I'm still with the government." "Oh my God, you're like a conspiracy theory," she giggled. "I love that for you." That was the moment I started to feel it. The gap. Not just in information, but in intention. They weren't curious. They were comfortable with the version of me that required no updates. It was easier to laugh than to ask. I never expected my mother to understand the nuances of national security. But I thought she might care enough to try. She didn't. Anytime someone mentioned my job in her presence, she'd smile tightly and change the subject. "She's doing something hush-hush," she'd say vaguely, as if it were embarrassing. Anyway, Lexi just got promoted again. And just like that, the spotlight shifted. I remember one Christmas, Lexi handed out monogrammed robes to everyone, made a whole production of it. I'd brought back a small set of hand-carved wooden chess pieces from a region I couldn't even name. They were beautiful. No one opened them. They stayed in the wrapping paper until someone accidentally sat on the box and broke one of the pawns. "Oops," Lexi said. "Guess war souvenirs aren't for everyone." More laughter. No one looked at me. It wasn't just the teasing. It was the absence of anything else. No one ever asked how I was sleeping, or if the job was dangerous. They assumed if I was alive, I was fine. Once, after I got back from an especially difficult assignment, I called my dad just to hear a familiar voice. He picked up, distracted, mid-grocery store trip. "Can I call you later? I'm picking out wine for Lexi's client dinner." I said sure. He never called back. The truth was, I had more contact with my unit's chaplain than my own family. During one of our quarterly psych evals, I mentioned the distance I felt at home. She listened quietly and asked, "Do they know what you do?" "No," I said. "They never asked." The psychologist nodded slowly. "Some people don't want to know. Because knowing would mean responsibility. Interest means accountability. So they choose fiction." That stayed with me. Because it was exactly what was happening. They'd built a version of me that served them. The absent sibling. The career recluse. The person who made herself scarce. They never wondered why. It was easier to assume I was just different. Detached. Distant. Even when I sent money to help cover my mom's dental surgery, I got a generic thank you text, "Appreciate the help. Hope everything's good out there in top secret land." Top secret land. That's what Lexi started calling it, like it was a theme park. She even used it in a toast once. At her birthday dinner, she clinked her glass and said, "Here's to another year of climbing the ladder, some of us in the real world, some of us in top secret land." Everyone laughed. Even my uncle, who'd served in the Navy. I sat there quietly, sipping club soda. My deployment bracelet itched against my wrist, the one engraved with 3 dates and 2 coordinates I couldn't explain. They didn't know what those meant. They never asked. They just assumed I hadn't done much. That I lived in a filing room, maybe sorted beans. That I'd missed the world while they moved forward. They didn't know the missions. The body recoveries. The classified footage I'd analyzed that helped dismantle an active threat. They didn't want to know. They just wanted to believe I was forgettable. It made their own accomplishments easier to celebrate. If Lexi was the success story, then I had to be the drift. It helped keep their world simple. Black and white. Main character and side plot. And I let them think that. Because I knew something they didn't. Eventually, the world was going to correct their story. Not because I told it, but because it would be told without me needing to say a word. And when that happened, it wouldn't be subtle. It would be national. Public. Undeniable. And they would have to sit in their living rooms and hear my name before they were ready. But that moment hadn't come yet. For now, they kept laughing. And I kept listening. Then came the dinner party. I had flown home for the first time in nearly a year. It wasn't a spontaneous visit. I had planned it weeks in advance, coordinating with my CO, securing temporary leave, and timing everything around an op I couldn't talk about. Also, I could spend exactly 4 days with the people who thought I worked in a basement sorting paper clips. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon. My mom met me at the airport with an awkward hug and a quick comment about how tired I looked. She asked if I still liked green tea, as if that had changed in the past decade. The car ride home was filled with small talk about Lexi's newest marketing campaign, a real estate show my dad liked, and the neighbors who'd divorced. Nothing about me. Not even a casual, "How's work?" Not even fake curiosity. The dinner party was Saturday. Supposedly for Lexi's big promotion, she'd been made executive creative director at a wellness startup that sold powdered mushroom drinks. She was hosting it at Mom and Dad's place since her apartment didn't have the right energy for a seated dinner, whatever that meant. I wore a soft gray sweater and black pants. Nothing flashy, nothing that would get questions. I knew how to blend in when needed. Years of practice. By 6:30 p.m., the house was packed. Aunts, uncles, old neighbors, a few of Lexi's work friends. The kind of gathering where everyone smells faintly of wine and expensive candles, and no one actually listens when you speak. I stuck near the kitchen at first, helping Mom refill the charcuterie boards while she whispered instructions under her breath. At some point, someone handed me a glass of wine. I don't remember who. I didn't drink it. Lexi made her big entrance at 7:15. Tight white dress, hair curled, glass of champagne already in hand. She floated from group to group like a politician on election night, accepting congratulations like they were owed to her. I'd been standing in the hallway, half listening to a story about someone's new puppy, when I heard my name. "Oh my God," Lexi said. "You're still here." She was grinning, but not in a warm way. She held up her glass like she was making a toast. "Still unemployed," she said. The room quieted, just for a beat. Then someone laughed, probably Uncle Derek. A few others joined in. My mother gave a smile that was more like a wince. My father looked down at his plate. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Lexi shrugged like it was nothing. "Must be nice," she added, turning back to her crowd. "Getting paid to disappear." The moment passed quickly. Someone clinked a fork on a glass. Music started again. The energy in the room bounced back. I stood still. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was done. Not the kind of done that comes with yelling or slamming a door. Just a quiet click, like something inside me had shifted a few degrees. Like a switch had been flipped and wouldn't flip back. I finished helping in the kitchen, said goodbye to the relatives who still remembered my name, and left without saying a word to Lexi. When I got back to my borrowed guest room, Mom had cleared out the treadmill and unfolded fresh sheets. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. It was the same pale blue it had been when I was 12. There were no photos of me in the hallway anymore. But Lexi's graduation picture, the one with her in the red dress and honors cords, had been reframed and centered between two wall sconces. That night, I didn't sleep. My phone buzzed with alerts I couldn't respond to. Somewhere, someone was waiting for my return. But here, I was just the extra chair at the table. The next morning, Mom made scrambled eggs. She set a plate in front of me like nothing had happened. "You looked tired last night," she said. I replied. She didn't ask why. Later that afternoon, I told her I had to leave a day early. "Something came up," I said. She nodded, not pressing for details. As I packed, I found the small gift I'd brought for Lexi, a bracelet from a market I'd visited during my last deployment. Handcrafted silver. The kind of thing that took hours of bartering and navigating alleyways to find. I left it on the dresser. No note. I didn't expect her to notice it was for her. She probably thought Mom had picked it up at a department store. When I boarded the flight the next morning, I felt nothing. Not sadness. Not guilt. Just a calm, detached sense of finality. They could believe whatever they wanted. That I was unemployed. That I had disappeared. That I was the sister who never quite figured life out. If that version of me made their stories easier to tell, I was done trying to correct them. They weren't interested in the truth. And soon, the truth would no longer need my permission to be heard. Because I already knew what was coming. The briefings. The clearances being lifted. The names that would be released. The footage that would air. And when it did, I wouldn't need to say a word. Lexi could pop all the champagne she wanted. But when that broadcast went live, she'd have to put the glass down. Because my name would be the first one spoken. And this time, everyone would be listening. I left early that night without saying goodbye. The air outside was colder than I expected for April. I didn't have a coat, just that same gray sweater I'd worn all evening, the one Lexi said made me look government-issued. I got in the rental car and sat for a minute, watching the condensation spread slowly across the windshield. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, like I'd been emptied out and left on a shelf somewhere. I drove with no destination in mind, weaving through the suburban streets I used to bike as a kid. Eventually, I pulled into a 24-hour diner off the interstate. The kind with plastic menus that stick to your fingers and booths you sink into like you're being slowly swallowed. The waitress was older, tired-looking but kind. She poured me a coffee without asking and called me Han like she meant it. I ordered eggs and toast. Ate slowly, even though I wasn't hungry. The silence was loud. Not uncomfortable, just present. I thought about all the years I'd tried to make it easier for them. Sending Mom money for her cracked molar when she wouldn't admit she needed help. Paying off the last of Lexi's student loans after she maxed her credit card booking a yoga retreat in Costa Rica. No thank you. Not even a text. When I mailed Dad a replacement for the vintage watch he lost, he called it a nice knockoff. They had no idea how many favors I'd pulled, how many side jobs I took just to be able to help without leaving a paper trail. Because that's what I did. I solved things quietly. And now here I was, sitting alone in a diner at 11:47 p.m., watching a teenage dishwasher argue with someone over the speaker in the back. A few tables over, a group of college kids were laughing too loud. One of them spilled syrup on his shirt and didn't care. I envied that. I stared down at my plate and tried to remember the last time I'd eaten a meal without looking over my shoulder. Without checking exits. Without wearing a name tag that wasn't mine. My phone buzzed once, an automated reminder about my return flight. Then another buzz. A news alert. Nothing relevant. I tucked it face down. The thing about betrayal isn't the moment itself. It's the replay. The hours after, when the room is empty, but the words are still echoing. Still unemployed? She said it like it was a joke, but it wasn't. Not to her. Lexi believed it. So did everyone else. And even if they didn't say it out loud, they tolerated it. That was the part that stung. Not the insult itself, but the quiet agreement in the room. No one pushed back. Not even Mom. I sipped my coffee and tried to think of the last time she defended me in public. Or even in private. Couldn't recall a single moment. I think I finally understood what my CO meant years ago. Silence is sometimes the sharpest blade. He'd said it after a mission went sideways and we lost a local contact, someone we trusted. The official line was neutral. Quiet. And in that silence, we knew exactly where we stood. That night, it clicked. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to force them to see me. I just needed to stop showing up for people who had already decided I didn't matter. The next morning, I changed my flight. Took the earliest seat I could find out of state. Mom didn't call to ask why I'd left. Neither did Lexi. It didn't surprise me. Back at base, I went straight to my quarters. Dropped my bags, took off the sweater, folded it, and set it aside like I wouldn't need it again. It still smelled like their house, cinnamon and bleach. I washed it twice. I threw myself into work after that. Said yes to extra shifts, training rotations, weekend simulations. When my supervisor asked if I needed time to decompress after leave, I told her I was fine. She nodded. Didn't push. She had that same knowing look I'd seen in a few others, people who understood what it meant to walk out of one kind of war and into another. We don't talk about family much on base. But sometimes, around the second hour of a night shift or over instant noodles at 3 a.m., the stories come out. Bits and pieces. A brother who stopped calling. A mom who sold a childhood piano without asking. A dad who only reached out for photos he could brag about. Everyone had their version. That helped in a way. It reminded me I wasn't alone in it. But still, I couldn't let it go. Not because I wanted to win. Because I'd spent so many years giving them the benefit of the doubt. Excusing the passive aggression. Laughing off the digs. Reframing their neglect as just being busy. But after that dinner, I stopped editing the story. They weren't supportive. They weren't curious. And they didn't respect me. They liked the idea of me being away. because it made things simpler. I was the variable they didn't have to accommodate. I didn't need rides, didn't need money, didn't ask for space. I was easy to forget. But they didn't get to act shocked when that distance became permanent. The week after I got back, my commanding officer called me into his office. Said something had come down the pipeline. A list. A program being declassified. I already knew what it was. He handed me a sealed packet. Your name's in it, he said. There was a pause. You're one of the first. I nodded. Understood. He looked at me carefully. You good with that? I'm fine. He didn't push further. Just said the press would be briefed in stages. Some agencies would handle the outreach. A few networks had been granted early access. My name would be in the first public segment. For years, I'd been a ghost. Now, I was about to be made visible. I thought about texting Mom, maybe giving her a heads up. But I didn't. Because if she found out with the rest of the world, maybe, just maybe, she'd realize how much she missed while she was too busy adjusting place settings and defending Lexi's honor. They had chosen not to know. Soon, that wouldn't be an option anymore. And when that moment came, I wouldn't be in the room to watch their reactions. Because I had already walked out. Not angry. Just done. So I stopped. No more flying in for family events. No more juggling op schedules to attend birthdays or anniversaries where no one remembered what I did or cared enough to ask. No more quiet transfers of money when someone's rent was late or a car battery died. I stopped playing the role they'd assigned me, dependable, invisible, always available. I didn't make a big announcement. I just stepped back. I responded to texts with one-word answers. Stopped sending photos. When Lexi posted a group family shot from Father's Day with the caption, "All my favorite people in one place," I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I let the distance settle in without apology. They noticed. My brother called first. "Hey, you good?" he asked, trying for casual but landing somewhere between defensive and suspicious. "Haven't heard from you in a while." "I'm fine," I said. "Nothing else." He paused. "You mad or something?" I said I wasn't. Then let the silence finish the conversation. 2 days later, I got a long voice memo from my mom. I played it once, standing in the narrow space between my bed and the wall, arms crossed as her voice filled the room. She started light, asking how I was, saying the garden had finally started blooming again. Then came the pivot. "I just hope you know that family doesn't keep score," she said, her tone dipping into the soft, performative guilt I'd heard 1,000 times before. "We've all got our strengths, our flaws, but at the end of the day, we show up for each other. That's what matters." She didn't ask why I'd pulled away. She didn't acknowledge the dinner party, or the years that led to it. Just implied that my silence was the real problem. I deleted the message without replying. I wasn't keeping score. I was closing the account. And for the first time in a long time, I felt clear. I focused on work, real work. Task forces, policy briefings, debriefs that made your skin crawl. I took on missions others passed up, handled logistics most didn't want to touch. There was comfort in the structure, in the certainty of being needed. Respected. Useful. Then came the email. It wasn't dramatic. No subject line in all caps. Just a message from a producer at a national news outlet. She introduced herself briefly, explained that their network was partnering with a federal transparency initiative, part of a controlled release of information tied to a multi-agency declassification effort. They were running a segment. A special report on unsung intelligence operatives. People whose work had never been publicly acknowledged. Whose stories had, until recently, been buried behind red tape and confidentiality clauses. My name was on the list. I stared at the email for a long time. They weren't asking for an interview. Just confirmation of identity and background clearance. They'd already obtained approval through official channels. The piece was happening with or without my input. I didn't volunteer for the spotlight. But I didn't object either. I forwarded the email to my commanding officer. He confirmed it. Told me to expect a follow-up from a liaison who'd help coordinate the legal parameters of what could be said on air. "This is a good thing," he said, in his usual understated tone. I nodded. "I know. They filmed most of it off-site. I didn't appear on camera, still too many layers between me and full visibility. But they used audio clips from a cleared interview, old footage from operations I'd helped coordinate, stills of terrain maps with my initials in the margins. Nothing classified, but enough to sketch an outline. They blurred my face in the unit photo, but my name? That they kept clear. It aired on a Wednesday night. Prime time. I didn't tell my family. I didn't need to. They found out anyway. The story opened with grainy footage, dust storms kicking up behind an armored vehicle, low-res thermal scans of movement through canyons. Then the voiceover started. These are the faces and fingerprints of operations you've never heard of. Names you've never known. Until now. My name came up 7 minutes in. Not at the end, not as a footnote first. The anchor spoke it clearly, followed by a montage of declassified records. My field commendations. An award for operational excellence I hadn't even told my mother about. A map, partially redacted, with pins in 3 countries I'd visited under aliases. Cut to a senior intelligence official saying my work had directly prevented multiple international crises. Cut to a still shot, me in uniform, eyes shaded, standing in front of a transport aircraft. You couldn't see my face fully. But if you knew me, you'd recognize the posture. Back home, the group chat must have lit up. Lexi texted me 15 minutes after the segment ended. Was that you on Channel 7 just now? No emoji. No question mark in her voice. Just disbelief. Then came a follow-up. Why didn't you tell anyone? I didn't answer. The next day, I got a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was thinner than usual. Slower. I watched the news last night, she said. Your father and I were sitting in the living room when your name came up. I didn't know. I mean, we knew you were working in something, but we didn't know it was like that. She paused. We're proud of you. Truly. We just wish we had understood earlier. That part made me laugh. Not out loud, just one of those breathy, humorless exhales that feels heavier than crying. They didn't wish they had understood. They just wished they hadn't been blindsided. Because now, their version of me, the one they told their friends about, the one they used to compare and diminish, was publicly disproven. They couldn't call me the quiet one anymore, or pretend I was doing admin work in a supply closet. Not when the government had just aired a nationally broadcasted profile calling me instrumental to international security. There was no spinning that. The group text shifted tone after that. My brother sent a message saying, "Damn, I had no idea you were actually in the thick of it." That's wild. Lexi reposted a clip of the segment on her Instagram story with the caption, "My sister is a badass flex biceps, who knew?" I didn't respond. Because they hadn't known. And they didn't ask. They'd been handed the truth not because they earned it, but because it could no longer be hidden. And that difference mattered. It always would. So no, I didn't call anyone back. I didn't explain what I did or didn't do. I didn't show up to the next birthday dinner or return the belated card they sent, just to say we're thinking of you. I wasn't mad. I was finished. And for once, they'd have to sit with the version of me they never took the time to learn. The real one. The night it aired, I didn't tell anyone. I made instant noodles and sat on the couch in sweats. No lights, no sound besides the hum of the fridge and the low static of the TV. I kept the remote in my hand the whole time, ready to turn it off if I changed my mind. But I didn't. The special opened quietly, somber piano music, stock footage of blacked-out bases and cargo planes. The kind of documentary tone meant to sound reverent without being emotional. The anchor spoke in that careful cadence that's supposed to carry weight. They introduced the segment as part of a broader declassification push, highlighting exceptional service from operatives whose identities had remained in the dark for years. Then came the footage, aerial shots of convoys under blackout. Blurred faces, radio chatter, bodies moving fast and silent through narrow corridors. A satellite image of a conflict zone, red dots spreading across the screen. Then freeze frame. My name. Full name. Spoken clearly. Staff Sergeant, redacted, one of the youngest intelligence coordinators in her unit, decorated for operational planning in 3 high-risk extractions and the successful disruption of a multi-nation trafficking network. The camera cut to a still photo, me in full gear, face blurred but body posture unmistakable. I was 23 when that photo was taken. Tired. Soaked in sweat. Just minutes after helping carry a wounded interpreter across a dry riverbed. The voiceover continued. She played a central role in the prevention of a 2018 diplomatic incident between U.S. and Allied forces, a crisis that could have escalated into armed conflict. Her actions, while classified at the time, are now recognized with the Joint Service Commendation Medal and a Civilian Impact Citation. They didn't overhype it. There was no dramatic music swell. Just facts. Plain, steady, undeniable. And that somehow hit harder than if they'd made it theatrical. I watched the full 10-minute segment, then turned the TV off. I sat in the dark for a while. Didn't move. I wasn't sure how to feel. Not proud, exactly. Not vindicated. Just exposed. I had never wanted my name on a screen. Never needed a headline. But part of me wondered how many people had just heard it, how many were sitting in their own homes, watching with a glass of wine or a half-eaten dinner, hearing my name and realizing the girl they'd underestimated had done something they'd never even imagined. I didn't have to wonder long. My phone lit up less than 5 minutes later. First, a call from my mom. I let it ring. Then her voicemail. I didn't listen to it all. Just enough to hear her voice crack halfway through. The sound of someone crying and trying not to let it show. I had no idea, she whispered. We didn't know. Another buzz, Lexi. Text after text. Why didn't you ever tell us? Seriously. That was you? I'm kind of stunned right now. I set the phone down. Let it buzz. For once, they were sitting in silence. For once, I didn't have to be the one explaining anything. I got up and washed the dishes. I cleaned the counter, took out the trash. Ordinary tasks. Small movements that grounded me in something familiar. When I came back, my phone was still buzzing. Aunt Teresa. Uncle Brian. Even Sarah, my cousin who once called me a conspiracy theory at a barbecue. Holy crap, she wrote. So that was real? You actually do spy stuff. They didn't say sorry. Not one of them. Just amazement. Curiosity. As if I were suddenly worth engaging now that someone else had validated my existence. I went to bed early. Didn't reply to anyone. The next morning, I woke up to an inbox full of unread messages. Some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old classmates, former neighbors, even a couple old coworkers from a retail job I'd worked in high school. I skimmed them. Most said the same thing, saw the news. That's incredible. Proud of you. But it was different coming from people who'd never pretended to know me. From them, it was curiosity. From my family, it felt like recovery. Like they were scrambling to rewrite a version of me they'd spent years dismissing. That week, I kept my phone on silent. Lexi texted again. I feel like such an idiot. You were doing all of that, and I was making jokes about you being unemployed. I didn't mean it like that. I just didn't know. But that was the problem. She didn't want to know. None of them did. It had been easier to flatten me into the role of the sister who left, the one who chose that life, the one who always kept things secret. Easier than asking real questions. Easier than sitting in the discomfort of not knowing everything. And now they had to sit with it anyway. I didn't respond to any of them until the end of the week. Just one message to Lexi. You didn't need to know the details. You just had to treat me like I mattered. She replied almost immediately. I'm sorry. Really. I don't even know how to make that right. I didn't answer. I didn't need an apology. I needed space. And now I had it. In the weeks that followed, the requests kept coming. Invitations for interviews. 1 podcast, 2 magazines. I said no to all of them. I'd been invisible for a long time. And not all of that was a loss. I started to build a new version of my life quietly. Switched divisions. Took on more strategic work, less field time. Began mentoring a few of the newer recruits, mostly women. Most of them reminded me of myself 5, 6 years ago. The kind of focused, overlooked people who were told they were too reserved, too serious, too quiet. I told them what no one told me early on. You don't have to be seen to be powerful. You just have to know your worth, even when others don't. At night, I still didn't check the family group chat. Lexi had added me back in after the news segment aired. Most of the messages were about brunch plans and Netflix recommendations. The same surface-level noise they'd always exchanged. But now, it all felt different. Because I'd stopped needing their attention. And the moment I stopped needing it, they started trying to give it. That's how it goes, I guess. People don't always recognize value until someone else names it. But the real change doesn't come from them. It comes when you realize the recognition you wanted was never worth more than the peace you gain by walking away. And that peace? I had it now. Fully. Quietly. Finally. Weeks passed before I answered. I kept meaning to. I'd open the messages, reread them, hover my thumb over the keyboard, then close the app and set the phone face down. It wasn't anger holding me back anymore. Just the weight of deciding what to let back in. Eventually, I agreed to meet my mom. Not at her house, not at mine, neutral ground. A small cafe just outside the city. Somewhere with big windows and no history. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the back, clutching a to-go cup with both hands like it might run away. When she saw me, she stood too fast, almost knocking over the little display stand next to her. She caught it before it fell. "I didn't know if you'd come," she said, her voice smaller than I remembered. I said I would, I told her, taking the seat across from her. No hugs. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a manila envelope, worn at the edges, the flap barely holding together. She slid it across the table toward me. "I found these in the attic," she said. "After the broadcast." I went looking. Inside were old letters, some I'd sent from base, others from overseas. Some typed, some scribbled in bad handwriting because the power had gone out and I was writing by flashlight. A few had photos tucked in. One had a receipt from a cafe in Poland I'd written on the back of, describing a storm that trapped us for 2 days with no exit point. She hadn't opened most of them. The seals were still intact. "I kept them," she said. "I just didn't always read them." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. Her hands were trembling slightly, the cup between them untouched. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know what you were doing. I didn't understand." I nodded. "I know. I should have asked." I nodded again. She looked down at the letters, then back at me. "I'm sorry." It was quiet after that. A couple behind us laughed over something on their phone. The espresso machine hissed in the background. I watched the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "It wasn't about knowing," I said finally. "It was about how easily you all assumed the worst. That I left because I didn't care. That I disappeared because I failed. No one ever asked what was actually happening. You just filled in the blanks with whatever made you feel better." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She just nodded. Slow and deliberate. "I know," she said again. "And I regret that. I regret all of it." We sat in silence for a while. She didn't try to hug me, didn't reach across the table, just sat there, absorbing it. For once, she didn't rush to explain or defend or minimize. That was new. We talk now sometimes. It's different. Quieter. She doesn't ask many questions, and I don't offer more than I'm ready to. But when I do talk, she listens. Really listens. Not just to respond, but to understand. She sent me a recipe last week, one I used to like as a kid. No message, just the recipe. I made it. I didn't tell her I did, but I made it. Sometimes rebuilding isn't about fixing everything. It's just about removing the rubble gently, piece by piece, and seeing what's still standing underneath. As for Lexi, I haven't seen her. She sent a few more texts, casual ones. Updates. Links. One was a video of a woman skydiving with a caption like, "We should do this LOL." I didn't respond. Then she posted the screenshot. It was from the news special. My name in the cheer-in, the photo of me blurred out just enough to be anonymous. She posted it to her story with the caption, "Proud sister moment." No tag. No direct message. No mention of the years she spent making fun of me at dinner tables, or the way she smirked when people asked if I was still doing that job thing. Just the story. Gone in 24 hours. I saw it, of course. Someone sent it to me. I didn't engage. Because public praise means nothing when it's used to scrub away private harm. She wanted the image of pride, not the work of accountability. And I wasn't going to help her build that. so I left it alone. I think she knows why. Rebuilding trust isn't a one-time gesture. It's not a caption or a throwback post. It's consistency. Presence. Showing up without the expectation of being applauded. My mom is trying. Lexi is pretending. And I'm okay keeping them in those respective lanes. Boundaries don't mean there's no love. They mean the love has rules now. Terms. Structure. I still keep my phone on silent most nights. Still ignore the family group chat when it turns into a highlight reel of lives that used to exclude me. But I've also started noticing the small shifts. My cousin Sarah sent me a message on Veterans Day. Not performative, just a quick note. I watched your segment again. Hope you're doing okay. Thanks for what you did. That one I replied to. I'm learning how to be visible again. On my own terms. Not as a myth or a utility or a punchline, but as a person. And the people who want to be part of that version of me, they'll have to meet me where I am, not where they imagined I stayed. It's been over a year. I'm back in civilian life, sort of. I still consult on occasion. Quiet work. Strategic planning. No field time, number 4 a.m. calls, no burner phones. I get to sleep in my own bed. Water my own plants. Make dinner and know I'll be home long enough to eat it. People always ask if it's hard to adjust. If it's strange going from high-risk operations to something this quiet. But I don't miss the adrenaline. I miss the clarity. Out there, the stakes were obvious. You knew the mission. You knew what mattered. Back here, everything's more subtle. The battles are smaller, but the impact still lingers. I keep my life simple now. Not out of fear, out of design. I moved into a smaller apartment. Walkable neighborhood. Local bookstore at the end of the street. The guy who runs it remembers my name. We don't talk much, but he always puts aside the new titles he thinks I'll like. That kind of quiet recognition feels like enough. I've built something steady. Grounded. Not flashy. Not broadcasted. Which is funny, considering how this all started with a broadcast. Every now and then, someone still brings it up. Usually by accident. A coworker will mention it in a meeting. I didn't know you were in that special last year. Or someone I barely know will say, wait, you're that woman from The Thing, right? And I'll nod. Politely. Then steer the conversation somewhere else. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. Not anymore. The people who needed saving know who did it. And the people who made jokes, who built their comfort on versions of me that weren't real, they know just enough now to sit with the discomfort of that. I don't need them to apologize again. Mom calls occasionally. We talk. Nothing deep, nothing dramatic. But it's consistent. She sends photos now, ones of her in the garden, or the dog curled up under a blanket. Sometimes, she sends old pictures of me. She found a box in the garage and has been going through them. She always says the same thing. You always looked so serious. I was. Lexi hasn't reached out in a while. Not directly, anyway. She still posts those filtered versions of her life, vacations, dinner parties, the occasional motivational quote. Every so often, I'll get tagged in something generic. Grateful for strong women or family is everything. I never respond. Not out of malice. Just clarity. You can't rewrite history with hashtags. And I'm not interested in being a prop in anyone's redemption arc. What I care about now is who shows up without needing an audience. Who listens when there's nothing to gain. Who asks how I'm doing and waits for the answer. I've made space for those people. There aren't many, but they're solid. And they don't care about my past in the way others do. They care about who I am in the present. Who I'm becoming now that I don't have to live under layers of secrecy and erasure. That's been the biggest shift. Realizing I'm allowed to be full now. Not edited for their comfort. Not diminished for their pride. Just here. Fully. I volunteer sometimes, mentorship mostly. Young women looking to enter intelligence or policy work. They come in with fire, with ambition. And I try to give them what I never had, context. Language. Permission. Permission to be serious. To be quiet. To be powerful without spectacle. One of them asked me recently, how do you deal with people underestimating you? I told her, you let them. Then you keep going. Let the results speak. And if they never acknowledge it, if they keep clinging to the version of you that feels safest to them, let them stay there. That's their prison, not yours. She wrote it down. I saw her underline it. There's a power in that. Being able to pass something on that took me a decade to learn. Some lessons don't need to come wrapped in pain. Others do. And mine did. But I'm not angry about it. Not anymore. Because the version of myself that existed before the broadcast, before the dinner party, before the silence, before the voicemail, I wouldn't have stood her ground like this. I wouldn't have known how. The woman I am now knows where the exits are. Knows when to stay. When to walk. When to speak. And when silence will say more than any explanation ever could. Sometimes I think about that moment, the broadcast airing, my name spoken out loud, the weight of it shifting inside the living rooms of people who had once dismissed me. I wasn't there to see their faces. I didn't need to be. Because justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it broadcasts. And when it does, it doesn't come with fireworks or apologies. It comes with facts. With clarity. With the calm, undeniable presence of truth. That was enough. It still is. Thanks for watching. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Or had to stay silent while people made up their own version of you? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you've ever had to walk away to protect your peace, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about choosing boundaries over approval. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones they should have paid attention to.